Anna Gibson, welcome to the Running Effect podcast. I would say, how's your afternoon going? It's morning for you. How's your morning going?
Morning is going great. Just sat down with my coffee, so no complaints here.
I'm sure it's dependent on what time of the year you're in and if you're in racing season, like build up season, off season, but generally, what does a day in your life look like?
For me, I mean, I'm not on a team, so I can kind of train whenever or go when friends are going. And yeah, so they all every day kind of looks a little bit different for me. Like there's always a little bit of admin, like laptop work, just keep life running, and then a training session, either run or bike ride. And then yeah, just try and eat lots of good food and get enough sleep and yeah, see some friends, do some social things here and there.
Let's talk about the food arena. As I'm sure you know, these conversations on the podcast are very like free flowing, and if I hear something, I'll go down that route. So going down the food route, you said making a lot of good meals. What are the go tos these days? And as someone, and we'll get into this in the trail mountain running scene, I'm sure you just burn a ridiculous amount of calories and come home utterly exhausted. Has that been a struggle getting in enough nutrition?
It definitely has a little bit lately, which is like I think why that's on the top of my brain. Where I was like, yeah, like make a lot of good food. I just spent 2 weeks over in Europe, and I was like racing and training, and it's just like one thing to another, like not being in the same place for more than a couple of days, and like I definitely struggled with food over there. I'm also gluten free, and so like finding enough carbs sometimes when you're on the road is really hard. And so I think like big staples in my life when I'm home, like, I eat a lot of rice and I eat a lot of gluten-free pasta, which usually is rice in just, like, a different shape, and, like yeah, basically that, like, try and get a lot of protein, and, like, a lot of vegetables, and, it's always just, like, a random combination of foods for me, like, it's usually not, like, a cohesive, beautiful meal, but it's, like, just a bunch of things, like, thrown together that seem to go well enough.
Are you a cookbook girl or are you, more go with the flow? I have these four ingredients. Let's see what I can make off the top of my head.
I am not a cookbook girl. Like, sometimes I'll
No.
look at recipes, like, as inspiration. I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of a good idea. Like, maybe I'll try that. Maybe I'll bake this thing." But even when I'm baking, like, I literally do not follow recipes. Like, I just, like, throw things in, and somehow it seems to turn out pretty good most of the time. There's, like, the occasional disappointment, but I feel like it works for me to be flexible.
As I'm sure you're aware, in the running community, I feel like a lot of people are under fueling and a lot of times without even realizing it. And I think runners don't realize how much food they need to fuel their endeavors. What's that process and journey been like for you of food and fuel and figuring out that balance?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is hard. Like, I think once you're training at a certain level, like, it's hard to just get enough, like, if you're just not really thinking about it. Like, if you're just like, "Oh, I'm hungry, so I'm gonna eat now," like, it's probably not enough. And so for me, it's, like, bringing a little bit of extra intentionality to it, like, "Okay, like, I'm not, like, entirely hungry right now, but, like, I need to eat more," or, like, just thinking about, like, what's happening 1 meal ahead. Like, if it's lunchtime, I'm already thinking about what's happening at dinner. Like, I can't wait until the last minute to be like, "Okay, it's 6 o'clock. Like, what should we do now?" So I think just, like, a little bit of, like, planning in your day and in your week, like, what's coming up and how am I gonna get everything I need?
I'm gonna set a scenario. You're running a little short on time or you're really hungry in the moment and you don't necessarily want to make food. You're in the San Francisco area for context. What's like your go-to spot you normally go to? Or if there's like a Whole Foods or something and they have an item that's really quick to like heat up and eat, your go-to like food item that you normally go to.
Oh, fair enough. My first instinct is, like, honestly, the leftovers, because I feel like there's always, like, extra food floating around in our fridge, so that'd be my number 1 go-to. Like, last night, I don't know, we are just tired and we're like, "'Kay, it's leftover night." There's also, like, a little market that's, like, a 5-minute walk from the house, and so it's, like, super fancy, it's kind of an experience going to this little market, and it's, like, right downtown in Mill Valley. So we sometimes will, like, walk down there and, like, grab something, like, easy to make, but, like, it feels, like, fancy even if you're, like, kinda slacking off. And it's just a nice, like, walk there and back.
I feel like most kids absolutely despise leftovers. I was gonna say was in that area arena. I probably still am though. When I go back to my parents' home and my mom pulls out leftovers, I think I am definitely a little disappointed. For you, were you a kid who loved leftovers or hated them? Have you come to
I
love them?
hated I hated leftovers, but I've come to love them, I think, and, like, the secret for me is, like, to add things. Like, you can't just pull the leftover Tupperware out of the fridge and then, like, pop it in the microwave and eat it, but if you, like, take it out and you put it in a pot and then you, like, add some tomatoes and some extra spices or, like, I don't know, last night I, like, added some prosciutto to some leftover pasta, and I was like, "Wow, prosciutto just makes anything taste fancy," and, like, it tasted like a whole different meal than what I ate 3 days ago, so it works for me.
When I think of a food that some people think is better as a leftover, a lot of people, controversial take, I don't agree with it personally, think pizza is better as a leftover. What's your take on this?
I do, but only like, not to eat at the house, like, you're not, like, having leftover pizza for dinner again, but I think, like, leftover pizza for lunch or, like, throw it in your running pack and, like, go eat pizza on the side of a mountain, like, that's pretty great.
I really want to dive into that. You said throw it in a running pack and eat it on the side of a mountain. Um, Part of the reason I really want to have a conversation with you is because I'm so fascinated by trail running, mountain running. It's something I haven't really tapped into. I haven't had too many guests who have participated in it, and I'm just so fascinated because I feel like it's a completely different beast from the track and the road. As someone who knows nothing about mountain running, where should we start? What should I know about it?
Oh gosh, first thing you should know is that it's, like, the most fun thing ever, and it's also very brutal. Like, the level of competition right now is, like, it's honestly kind of crazy, and, like, there are so many people that are taking to that world, like, having come from track, road backgrounds, and, like, I don't know, just, like, absolutely tearing it up. Like, it feels like every race I show up to, there's, like, a new person. It's like, "What the heck? Like, where did you come from?" And, like, they just kinda become this, like, trail running sensation, and, um, yeah, but it's also just, like, it's so different. Like, the environment is so different because it's really playful and, like, ultimately, like, it's just about, like, being outside and being in the mountains, and I feel like the people that are drawn to it, like, really just, like, love the actual act of doing that. Like, it's not always about competition, even though we're, like, competing against each other. Like, it's like, okay, worst thing that happens is, like, I ran in the mountains with a bunch of super cool people on this day, and I, like, had a hard time. Like, it's still a cool experience just to be there.
I'm sure we'll get into this in our conversation, but you also are a high level track athlete, which made me even more curious about your story. You placed 18th at the US Olympic trials this past summer in the 1500 of all events. And so it's just remarkable, first off. But second off, I'm just curious for you, is that mindset different when you approach one of these mountain trail races as opposed to something like the 15? Because I feel like in track, the competitors are very cutthroat and probably don't have that mindset, at least from the outside.
It is totally different. Like, I kind of feel like I have, like, a completely different, like, mental set of skills that I approach these 2 sports with. Like, they don't even feel like the same sport. Like, trail running and track running are not they're not the same, even though, like, some of the training is, like, complementary and stuff. Like, just the way that you have to approach them is totally different. Like, the track, like, the margins between people are so narrow that, like, you really can't afford to, like, make a decision that, like, I don't know, you make one bad decision and it, like, ruins your race, or, like, you're not doing a key element of training and it, like, ruins your entire season and your build. Trail running is, like, so much more, like, free flowing, and there's not that much science behind it yet. Like, there is, and it's growing, but, like, there are, like, new discoveries that come out every week, and, like, new studies about, like, nutrition and, like, footwear on trails and all these things. Like, it's just, like, this kind of untapped, like, um uncontrolled environment where, like, there are probably, like, a million different ways that you could get to a successful outcome. And I feel like, yeah, there's totally different. So, like, my brain is, like, doing different things when I'm competing in different spaces.
For you growing up or in sport, was there a moment where you thought maybe you have a future in trail running? And what was that moment like for you in terms of, oh, wow, this could be something I could potentially explore in the future?
Ooh, well, I will start by saying people always ask me, like, "Oh, how did you get into trail?" And, like, I feel like I kind of got into trail at the same time I got into track because my high school, like, we would run trails and then do track workouts and then go cool down on the trails again. And so it was kind of always just one and the same for me. So I never saw them as, like, completely separate things, I guess. Like, they could coexist in my life. And I kind of, like, carried that all the way through high school, all the way through college. Um, I think I was not aware that trail running could be a career until like partway through college. And I started seeing people who I knew and who I'd competed against in like trail races in the summer who were like kind of seemed like they were making a career out of it. And maybe they like worked another job, but they were like traveling the world and getting to compete. Um, and I like traveled internationally after my senior year of college and competed in a World Cup race over in France, and I got fourth there and like had such an incredible experience and like had my eyes totally open. Like, wow, there's like people who are like doing this and just this, and like this is an option if I want to go here. So I think that was kind of like the original spark of like inspiration that maybe there was like a career waiting for me once I was done with NCAA.
I think for those who don't know you and they hear us talking about trail running, they're probably assuming, oh, she's just really good at trail running. But filling out some of your story, you were a remarkable college or you were a remarkable athlete in college. You ran for UW. You were actually a part of the NCAA record team in the DMR. And then you also killed it in the 1500. I think you placed third in Pac 12 one year. Take me through those years and how formative they were for you as an athlete and as a person.
Yeah, I mean, the NCAA is like where I learned just to compete. And I also just like I honestly I struggled a lot during college. Like I don't think that my results, like my running resume coming out of college, like I don't think that it's like that flashy or impressive or like it wasn't all the things I wanted to do, you know, like it was not first case best case scenario how I left the NCAA. I just like had an injury that took 2 years to heal and then COVID happened and I just like didn't really hit my stride until my fifth and sixth year, which pretty much is when all of those things that you just listed off happened to me. um, so yeah, I mean, it was formative in a lot of ways, like beyond just competing well and having opportunities to race. Like I just had to figure out like that running actually was something that I wanted to dedicate myself to, even when it was hard. And like I learned how to take care of my body in ways that like I didn't know how to in high school because I literally couldn't run if I didn't stretch, if I didn't eat well, if I didn't like sleep well and prioritize it. Um, yeah, and also it's just a ton of fun. Like it reaffirmed to me that like I love running and I want to take it further.
Before even UW, you were like a remarkable athlete on paper. I don't know if I've ever seen this, so I want to get your take on this. You won 17 overall Wyoming state titles combining track, cross country, and Nordic skiing. One, where's Nordic skiing come from? How many titles were there? And two, how in the world did you get 17 state titles? Where are all those medals and trophies currently?
Well, I'm not going to discount Wyoming. I love Wyoming. It's a wonderful state, but it's not the most competitive in terms of high school
I don't care.
athletics.
17 is crazy.
um,
I've never heard
but
that.
uh, yeah, kind of crazy, but yeah, just a cool experience for sure. High school was a great time. And actually my favorite titles from this. There was one year my sister was also Nordic ski racing. She's 2 years older than me. There was one year like at Nordic state championships, there's two events. And so there's like one skate skiing event and one classic skiing event. And I won one and she won the other. And it was so awesome. Like we like traded off the wins and that one was super special. Yeah.
How much did the state, I use this word lightly, but hate you in the sense of like, I can't wait for this girl to move on and get out of our state so that some other kids can win some state titles? How mad were the opposing coaches that you existed?
Honestly, I don't think too mad. I'm actually like friends with some of them now. Like they kind of have like stayed in my life as people who just like reach out when something cool happens or whatnot. So I felt like very loved and I still do in the state of Wyoming. Like I had honestly like such a great high school experience.
I believe it was in 2016, you ended up placing 4th at NXN. So to give you your flowers, you weren't that just shows you weren't just good in Wyoming, like NXN is the best of the best. What was that experience like for you coming from a state where you probably it sounds like had no competition to then racing the best of the best, and what did you learn from that specific meet in terms of like handling probably this crazy pressure that you were feeling, this whole new stage that you weren't used to experiencing and still coming out at a really, really good place.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of like look back on that experience and like I was like such a little fish in a big sea. Like it felt the opposite of what you'd expect. Like you'd expect maybe that there was pressure and that I was like, oh my God, biggest stage I've ever been in. Like I have to perform so well and all this stuff. But like really there was no pressure because it was like, well, I've had this great high school career. Like I haven't had the opportunity to race like this before at a national meet of this level and like have this type of competition. So whatever happens, like it's great that I'm here, like you kind of have this like built-in sense of gratitude and it like takes all the pressure off that like you have to perform or like I don't know, no one's expecting you to win that if you're like coming from Wyoming. And so I didn't feel that much pressure and it was honestly just a really cool experience to like be thrown into the deep end um and figure out that like I can swim in the deep end, like I belonged there.
So track, cross country, Nordic skiing, 17 state titles, fourth at NXN. I know you did really well at New Balance Nationals, did well at the Dream Mile. You also were your valedictorian with a 4.0 GPA. What in the world was your schedule in high school? How did you survive and how'd you manage your time?
Sometimes I wonder that, I'm like, how did I do this when I was like so young? Because now like I train and I'm like, wow, my day is full. Like I didn't have time for anything else. Um, I think I was really good at time management and like also on the school front, as I mentioned, my sister, she was 2 years older than me and like she took the hardest course load ever taken at her high school. She was like a phenomenal student and I felt like the bar was set so high that I was like in the classroom, I was like trying to keep up with her and be like, no, like, yeah, the Gibsons are smart, like we're good students. And I'm grateful for her. Like she really pushed me in that regard because I think otherwise I would have fallen into more of the category of like just pushing running. Um, but yeah, I don't think I had a lot of free time in high school. I was just like constantly either at school, training, or doing homework or sleeping.
I know some schools and states do it differently, but at least where I came from, if you're the valedictorian, you gave a speech at graduation. Do you remember what was said in your speech senior year of high school graduation?
I sure do. It's pretty classic, honestly, and I'm, like, a little bit embarrassed to share this, but I wrote a speech about how the 4 years of high school are like the 4 years of the mile on the track, and how, like, first lap, you go out, you're feeling good. Freshman year, you're like, "Let's go, I'm in high school, this is great." Second lap, you're, like, starting to work a little bit hard. Third lap is when all the, like, the good stuff happens, but you're, like, really in the grind, like, that's where the race is, like, it's either make or break, like you take your tests in high school, you figure out if you're like a good student, if you're going to go to like a competitive college, like all this stuff. And then like the fourth one is just kind of this like final victory lap and like how we're running down the home stretch at graduation with all the people there. It was like very cheesy. Um, but also like so on brand, I feel like for my high school experience.
I don't know if I've ever heard of that analogy before. So, at least to me, if I was there, I would have been impressed. Not sure what the good people of Wyoming were thinking, but I've never heard that before. So, unfortunately, I graduated high school. Otherwise, I would have used that one. Talking about the Nordic skiing front a little bit more. So, in 2017, you were the junior national champion in the 10K Classic for Nordic skiing. I'm assuming it's my ignorance is showing here. I'm assuming it's an Olympic event, Winter Olympics. Have you ever thought about potentially dabbling? You do track and trail running. Have you ever thought about bringing back the third, complete the
um,
trifecta, go back to the
I
high school
definitely
days?
I definitely have, and it's like it's a sport that I love so much. Like I still watch the World Cup skiing and like I watch it at the Olympics and everything. I have a bunch of friends who are like now competing at that level professionally, and so I follow their careers and I definitely miss it at times. Like I did kind of go back to it a bit coaching in the summers, like working with the high school ski team back home. So I've thought about it, but I don't know that I have, like, a super strong desire to, like, go back and compete right now, but I think, like, I will continue to, like, be involved in the ski world and, um, yeah, I don't know where it will take me. But I don't think I'll go back and, like, race competitively.
For these sports, I would say three sports. You might say two. You might combine trail and track. Is the biggest like important thing the aerobic development because of the crossover and of your friends who are like Nordic skiers, do you think if they tried to be good runners they would be just because their aerobic capacity and VO2 max is probably off the charts? How much crossover do you think there is in terms of like aerobic sports?
There definitely is a lot, and, like, there are actually a lot of people who, like, compete in both, because in the summer, you obviously can't be skiing full time, and so they do a lot of running to train, and, like, yeah, there's some people that I race with internationally who like either compete in Nordic or they do ski mountaineering. And I think like some of them are like some of the strongest athletes I know because they just are constantly like revving up their aerobic engine in a way that like you can't necessarily run that much volume, but you can like train more on skis because it's lower impact. So it's kind of this like little secret key to like getting to do more aerobic work than your body would let you if you were just running.
So you have a super successful high school career. You go to UW. We talked about some of the things you accomplished and a little bit of your journey, but filling out that like first year, what was that year of transition like from small town in a small state to a bigger state, one of the most impressive schools with one of the most impressive coaches in the NCAA?
So, little caveat to the story here is I graduated high school and I went to Brown for a year and a half
Okay.
in Rhode Island. So, my freshman year was spent there, and I got hurt 2 weeks into my freshman year. So I had come out of this like great high school experience, hadn't really like I don't know. I was so excited for college. I was like hadn't really even considered the possibility that like my freshman year might be like really hard, and I like got hit with that reality like a freight train. Like it was really hard. I loved school. Like academics there were amazing. If I was just trying to be a student, I think I would have found a way to be really happy there, but the injury like kind of wrecked me and like trying to figure out who I was like without running on top of like being in a different state, being with different friends, like a completely new environment was just like so hard for me. And I did like there were things about it that were great, but I ultimately like yeah, after a year and a half, I like took some time off from school, and that's when I transferred to UW. So I showed up there like the end of my sophomore year out in Washington.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So quick detour here. You've lived in Wyoming, Rhode Island now, Washington with Seattle, UW. Now you live right outside of San Francisco in California. I'm sure there are probably other places you've lived that I don't know about. What's your like ranking top cities, top states in the US?
Ooh, I mean, Wyoming is always gonna be home. Like, and if you've been to Jackson Hole, like, you know why. Like, the mountains are just, like, incredible, and it's really cool living somewhere where other people, like, go on their dream vacation. I feel really fortunate that I got to spend my childhood there. Um, I'm not really a city person, so I think, like, all these other experiences have been, like, just very interesting for me, like, I don't live in San Francisco now, which I'm really grateful for. Like, it's a super cool city, but I like that I can just go into it when I feel like it. But then where I live, it's like there's just like a lot of trees and greenery, and it's like everyone has like a yard, and there's trails like 3 minutes from my door. Um, I think like I would probably put this place second after Jackson. Um, I had a great experience in Seattle too. Like I thought it was really cool all the things that I could do within like an hour from my house. Like I could go for like a crazy trail run in the mountains. I could ski within an hour. Like I could go to the ocean and like surf. I could swim in the lake. Like there's just like an endless amount of things to do, and I really liked that. And Rhode Island was fine. No hate on Rhode Island, but I just like it wasn't like my favorite place ever.
Very fair, very fair. So, come to UW. I'm curious to hear about Coach Powell and the impact she had on you. Obviously, has had such success over the years, just throughout her coaching tenure. Won an NCAA championship at Oregon. Her and her husband Andy kind of flipped around both programs at UW. What was your experience there, and how do you think she helped grow you as an athlete in your few years there?
Yeah, I mean, Marisa like was very pivotal in my running career. Like I had been recruited by her in high school, and so that was while she was actually at Oregon. And I like debated, do I go to Oregon or do I go to Brown? And ultimately, I chose going to Brown. She had told me like after I already had committed, she said, if things don't work out back east, call me. And then she walked away. That was like her parting words to me. And then like, fast forward a year and a half and like things were not working out back east. And so I like gave her a call and I was like, this lady probably doesn't even remember who I am. Like I haven't run in 2 years, and like I've just been over here like hurt, like struggling, not sure like how I'm supposed to like make it through this. And so I called her and I was like, hi, like I don't think you remember me, but like I want to run. And she of course was like, don't be silly, like I know who you are. And like show up at UW in 10 days and we will like get you back on your feet and you're going to be great. And I was like, okay. So I literally like, yeah, within 10 days had like turned my life around and was like moving from one coast to the other, to be coached by her. And like, if it weren't for that opportunity, like, I don't know where I would have ended up or like if I would have continued to run. Like I was like really struggling at that point and I was kind of like, okay, last ditch effort. Like it's going to take a special person to like take me back on their team after like literally not running for 2 years. And she did. So I'm really grateful for that. And like, yeah, I think she just like took a chance and it was awesome. So
I'm sure one of the more memorable moments at UW was that school record that you were a part of. Take me through that day, take me through that race and the emotions afterward, sharing it with your teammates. I imagine holding an individual record is cool, but I bet it's also maybe even more cool doing it with three other people who you train with, are really good friends with.
yeah, I mean, I don't think people even like believe us when we tell this story, but we literally like we flew to Boston. None of us were thinking about the national record. Like it was not like we flew there to go do this thing. We were like, okay, we're gonna go to Boston. We're gonna like qualify the DMR for nationals. That was the goal. And we show up, like a whole bunch of things had happened. I'm not really sure, but like a bunch of teams had like pulled out of this meet and like weren't gonna be there. So we're like, okay, like we might be time trialing, not really sure. And we all just like got down to business. And I mean, there was like ridiculous stuff going on. Like my teammate Sophie O'Sullivan, like she had like she was dyeing her hair before the race and like somehow got it all over her hands and all over her neck. So there was like purple paint absolutely everywhere. We're all like laughing our heads off. She was like 15 minutes late because of this. Like it was just like total chaos, but like we're having a great time as a team. Um and yeah, I don't know. We had like a magical time. Like every one of us that got the baton, we were just like on a mission. And like, I didn't realize until like 300 meters to go that we were like on the national record and that like we were about to do something really special. Like, meanwhile, the stadium was empty. Like, it was so weird. We're at BU and like I'm used to that place being absolutely packed and there was no one there. Like, there was like just the men's teams who were also about to run their DMR race. That's it. So it was just this like really weird, like super cool experience. And even though no one was there, like I don't know, we celebrated so hard. And like I look at the pictures from that night and I'm like, it still makes me tear up. It was so cool.
What's a moment off the track, off the grass that brings you happiness and fond memories, whether it's a moment after practice, a specific run where some teammate took you guys on the trail and you got lost, or whatever it is, you probably know. What's a fun memory off the track from years at Washington?
um, well, as everyone knows, it rains a lot in Seattle. And I have like so many memories of us just like grinding it out in the rain. Like, this is insane. Like, what are we doing? Just there's this park in Seattle called Magnuson Park, and there's a loop, like a gravel loop around it. And like we would go out there and just like work really, really hard. And in the pouring rain, it's like been gray for days. And I think just like the dedication that exemplified to me, like that probably will stick with me for the rest of my running career. Just sharing that with friends.
What point in your collegiate career did you realize that, or maybe it was after that, going pro was something you wanted to explore and could be a possibility?
Um, I think it was somewhere like probably during my 5th year. And I don't really remember it being like a specific moment. Like I I thought it would be I always thought it was gonna be a stretch for me to go pro in track. Like I wasn't really sure how that was gonna work out because like I said, like my career just felt like one thing after another with like transferring, the injury, like COVID happened as soon as I got healthy and I missed a bunch. Like it just felt like I hadn't really hit my stride yet and I hadn't been able to like prove myself. And I was like, well, I hope I like get the chance, but I'm not sure that, like I might run out of time. And yeah. But then like in the summers I was like competing on the trails and I'd had a couple of good performances at like at events where like I was beating professionals. And so I kind of saw that as more of an opportunity. And I think it was like during my 5th year that I realized like, okay, maybe I can do both. Maybe I can like continue to compete on the track and do trails. And that was like where the idea to have the career that I have now really like took hold and I like couldn't get it out of my head.
You're a professional runner for Brooks. When did that conversation take place? Obviously, for those who don't know, Brooks is based out of Seattle, so you guys were in the same city as each other for a few years. When did this all take place, and what's it like being with Brooks now? Also, an aside, I'm sure he'll listen to this conversation, so shout out Garrett. Any conversations with Garrett in terms of amazing track runner, and then towards the end of his career, he starts ripping it up on the trails. Kind of cool connection there.
Yeah, definitely shout out Garrett. That's where this conversation started, and I'm really glad that Garrett was the person I was having it with. Um, I had had, like, honestly, a pretty bad race at NCAA's, like, my final one at the end of my 6th year at UW, and I was, like, moping around the day after because I didn't make the final, and I was like, I really wanted to make the final, and I really should have made the final, and I didn't, and I was just like, "Wow, that was a terrible ending to this experience, like, what am I gonna do?" And then I like got linked up with Garrett and we like sat and had a coffee. And he was like recruiting me to like bring me on to the team at Brooks to run the 1500, which was like surprising to me after I'd had a pretty bad race. I was like, that wasn't exactly the performance that I thought brands would be approaching me about, but okay. And I think like, yeah, the conversation started being about the 1500, but I was like, well, I also want a trail race. Like, I don't really know how that fits in. And I was kind of like gauging the conversation, and like Garrett being Garrett was like, well, like, why not? Like, you could do both, maybe. Like, let me go back to Brooks and like see what we have in terms of like support for the trail team also. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is literally my dream come true. Like, if I could run for Brooks and I could have both, um, and yeah, have equal support to like do whatever type of running I want, like that is literally my dream come true. Um, so yeah, and I think Garrett was a very special person to like understand that and be able to go back to the brand and like know what I was going for and why.
I think multiple brands are starting to have people who had extensive histories in the sport start to ascend in leadership. But speaking about Brooks specifically with Garrett, what's it been like to work with him and the team, but specifically him as someone who was an athlete? Whereas I think 20 years ago in this industry, it was people who strictly went to college, got fancy degrees, worked at the company for 10 years, climbed the ladder. But it's really cool to see present day of like someone like Garrett who had such a successful career on the track. I followed him back in the day. Get a role like this. Every single athlete at Brooks has like nothing but positive things to say about him because he gets it in a way in which you
Hmm.
wouldn't if you didn't go through the things that you guys went through.
Yeah, I mean 100%. It's like so obvious in everything that he does that like he understands what athletes need to be successful and like how we work, which I think just makes a huge difference. Like it's just athletes working with athletes, like everyone's supporting each other, and like yeah, he like just understands it through and through, and I think it makes him really good at his job.
Looking ahead to the future, 2024 happened. Oh, I guess there's a few months left, but a lot of your racing has happened. Uh, Super successful seasons for you. Looking ahead to the future, what are some of the things you're looking to accomplish, looking to tackle, and what are some of the ambitions for the coming years as you think and dream ahead to the future years?
Well, I'm in very much the middle of my trail season right now, so I honestly haven't even gotten to 2025. Like I have no freaking clue what I'm going to be doing in 2025.
Let's
2024,
hear
I
about
have
2024 then. Yeah.
so I have two races coming up in the next month. They're actually in California. One of them is like in my backyard here, and then one is in Mammoth Lakes. And basically, like I'm racing in the Golden Trail World Series, which is like the major sub ultra running series that's going on in the world right now. So it's like most of the most competitive athletes are participating in it, and they score the events, and then there's also a final, and so there's like an overall world ranking with the series. And so I've competed in one like 2 weeks ago now, and then I was also racing in the second one, and then they actually canceled the race in the middle of the event. So we ran seven
Oh
miles
no.
up this mountain in insane rain, and it was crazy weather. And then there was a bunch of lightning, so they called off the race and they made us stop. It was crazy. Um, but yeah, so then the two races here in California are like the next two in the series, and then I'll compete in the final in October, which is back in Switzerland. Um, so those are the big goals right now, is like to do well in Golden Trail, which is like yeah, it's like so competitive and it's so fun. It's really cool, like being a part of a series where the whole season matters as a whole. A little bit different than like track, I feel like. Yeah, and then 2025, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what the balance
Nordic
between
skiing?
track and trail will be. Maybe bring back Nordic skiing. Is that your vote? Do you think I should?
I think it'd be cool. I just think looking at your high school resume, like it'd be cool to bring some of this stuff back. But I also know nothing about Nordic skiing. I just think it would be cool to see you one day make an Olympic team in both seasons. Very few
Go
people
for
have done it.
summer and winter, yeah.
Yeah. That's like
That'd be
ultimate
pretty
clout right
epic.
there. That is ultimate clout right there. But I'm sure if you don't, you keep ripping it on the track, on the trails, you'll be more than good to go. Speaking of something that I don't think you've done that I want to get your take on, again, as someone, I'm going to sound ignorant here because I don't know as much about trail running, but my knowledge of like stuff like that is more in ultras, which I think is a whole completely different sport. But have you ever considered or like looked at races like Leadville or Badwater or just some of the other ones, like these ridiculous 100-mile races that you see people like David Goggins run? What's your take on these? What's your take on these races?
I mean, they're totally iconic. Like, I definitely for a long time, I was like, "Ah, I'm not really interested in that." Like, I'm a sub ultra girl. Like, I run the 1500, whatever. And then I like went and I helped crew a friend that was running Leadville, one of my Brooks teammates last year. We like had a team camp, so all the Brooks Trail athletes were down in Colorado for that. I guess I should probably say up because it's at 10,000 feet of elevation. But anyways, we were up in Leadville, and just like being a part of that environment and seeing it, I like finally understood just like how insane it is to run 100 miles. And my coach David Roche, he just broke the record this like, well, 2 weeks ago, a week ago at Leadville. And like just I don't know the experience he's going through. I'm like, this just seems so magical. Like, I want to know. I can't be a trail runner and not know what it's like to run that distance. So at some point, I think yes, I will be doing that. But like right now, it's not like a trajectory that I'm on. Like, I'm not really thinking about it that much. I'm like very present with what I'm doing and excited about the shorter distances. And yeah.
Anna, for those who have listened to our conversation today and are inspired by all that you've done, all that you've accomplished from the dual pursuits of track and trail running, all the way back to the valedictorian status in high school and 17 state titles. And I'm sure a lot of curiosity mixed in there from the listeners. I feel like you've inspired a new subset of trail runners within this community. I'm like, I don't think there are trails in Columbus, Ohio, but I'm trying to find them after this conversation. What's the final takeaway message that you want to leave with the audience today? Anything from your career or just wisdom you've accrued over the years that you want to share with the next generation?
I would just say like the thing I try to live by is like do what you love, even if that's not what it looks like for other people. Like, I think there was a lot of doubts as I was going through my process. Like, like you don't have to do trail, like, or you don't have to keep doing the 1500. Like, how's this going to work? Are you going to make this work? Like, the training isn't even similar. Like, I don't know, people just kind of questioning me. Like, there aren't really a bunch of examples of people like being successful at what I'm trying to do. And so I could have seen that as like a reason to not do it. But instead, I'm like, well, I think it's going to work. Like, it's what I want to do, it's what I love to do. Like, I might as well go and try and be that example for people who come after me. And so, yeah, I would just say like whatever that is for you, like it doesn't have to be like the track and trail duality. Like maybe it's Nordic skiing. I don't know. Like whatever it is, I think just like finding out what that is for you. Like you don't necessarily have to like follow the path that other people are on in order to like compete and be successful.
Anna, we started out our conversation with food. We'll close it with food. The final question I ask every guest on every single episode: if you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you choose to make for him? Don't say leftovers.
Definitely not leftovers. Um, a couple weeks ago, I made this like kind of Asian noodle bowl thing, and it was just like a bunch of vegetables, this like peanut sauce, some sesame sauce, and it was so good. I would just replicate that for him, even though it definitely wouldn't wow him at all. It probably would be a huge
You
disappointment, but
never know.
I'd do my
Yeah,
best.
crazier things have happened. You'll just have to like so he's a runner. I don't know if you knew that. He's done like over 10 marathons in his life. So I bet if you just
I did
talk his
not
ear
know that.
off, distract him while he's eating the food, he'll just be happy that he's full and satiated by the end of the meal. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. New strategy
He's just a
unlocked.
hungry guy, probably.
Yeah, there you go. Anna, really appreciate the conversation. Keep crushing it. Can't wait to see all the things you accomplish and whatever you pursue. That's something I've learned from this conversation is that if you have a goal, you're going to chase after it and do things in the process. So excited to follow along in the future and really appreciate you sharing all the wisdom from quite the life you've had thus far.
Well, thank you so much. It was great chatting with you.